Jamie was on the floor, clutching his stomach, pale and sweating through his t-shirt. I was holding his hand, whispering it would be okay, even though I knew the pump battery was dead and his glucose was crashing. The pharmacy had closed. We needed a ride, or a single $20 bill for Uber. I had $3 in my account. Dad stood by the kitchen island, sipping scotch with Felicity on speakerphone. She was excited about her new dorm at Yale. I could hear her roommates giggling in the background. 400,000 wired this morning, he told her proudly. No debt. You just focus on thriving. Dad, Jamie needs help. We need $20. That's it, I interrupted. He turned, slow, sighed. That's your mother's responsibility. I'm not your emergency fund. He left the room. I sat there holding my brother's trembling hand while my father sent nearly $500,000 to my half-sister for her dream education and wouldn't spare a 20 to help his own son survive the night. I know how it sounds, but that night didn't come out of nowhere. I'm Callan Rhodes, 27, quiet, dependable, too mature for my age, or so they always said. Grew up in Missouri, oldest child from my father's first marriage. I was the one who cleaned up the mess when he left us. The one who helped raise Jamie when our mother went back to work, and the one who got pushed to the sidelines when Felicity was born. This story isn't about a single night. It's about years of manipulation, guilt, and emotional control. But that night was the spark, the one where I realized he never planned to choose us. So I stopped playing the daughter he wanted and started becoming the woman he never saw coming. My father, Gerald Rhodes, was a successful corporate attorney in Kansas City. Clean suits, sharp tongue, reputation built on winning. He left my mother when I was 12 and Jamie was 6. Said he'd outgrown us. The day Jamie turned 16, Dad forgot to call. 2 weeks later, Felicity turned 18, and he flew out with a Tesla Model Y wrapped in a pink bow. Jamie saw the photos on Instagram before school. Mom didn't say anything. She just gripped the steering wheel a little tighter on the way to Walmart. That's when I started documenting everything. Receipts, transfers, email printouts, dates he missed, money he moved. Not for revenge, not yet. At first, I just needed proof I wasn't crazy. I created a folder on my laptop titled Family Documents. Inside were screenshots of Felicity's Instagram posts showing gifts, vacations, concert tickets. Bank statements showing the exact dates Dad transferred money to her account. Voicemails he never returned to Jamie. Birthday cards we never received. Every piece of evidence was dated, labeled, and backed up on 3 different drives. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I'd need it someday. Dad started suggesting I work through my resentment in therapy. He even offered to pay for it, not out of kindness, but to paint me as the angry one if I ever confronted him. You need to let go of this narrative you've built, he'd say, smile tight, like I was some emotional project. Meanwhile, he was wiring Felicity rent money like it was his second mortgage. I went to therapy, not to get over it, but to sharpen my clarity. Dr. Patricia Warren was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and zero tolerance for manipulation. She listened to my story without judgment. Your father is using concern as control, she told me during our 3rd session. He wants you in therapy so he can tell people he tried to help you. That makes him look reasonable and you look unstable. I sat with that for a week. Then I started using our sessions differently, not to process my pain, but to strategize my exit. You always ask me to choose between my kids, he told me once, hands raised in performative exhaustion. He said it like I was unreasonable, like I was asking for too much. But the truth was he'd already chosen, long before Felicity was even born. He just didn't want to say it out loud, because then the mask would fall. So I made a choice of my own. I stopped giving him anything real. Not my time, not my emotions, not my forgiveness. He didn't notice. Family dinners became performances. I'd show up, smile at the right moments, nod when expected. But I stopped sharing anything that mattered. My work struggles, my goals, my fears, all of it stayed locked inside. Dad thought I was finally maturing, finally letting go of my anger. Really, I was just done letting him have access to the parts of me he'd already proven he didn't value. Emotional withdrawal looks like peace if you're not paying attention. Felicity was majoring in environmental studies. Changing the world, Dad called it. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs and taking night classes to finish my business analytics degree. When I brought up student loan stress, he shrugged. You're resourceful, he said. You'll figure it out. Translation, you're not worth investing in. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, evenings doing bookkeeping for small businesses. My nights were spent in online classes, learning statistical modeling and financial forecasting. I slept 4 hours most nights. Felicity posted photos from her spring break trip to Costa Rica, funded entirely by Dad. She was studying coral reefs for a class project. I was studying balance sheets in my car during lunch breaks. The difference wasn't talent or potential. It was just who he decided mattered. And I was learning that matching wasn't something you could earn from someone who'd already decided you didn't. He offered to pay for one of my classes, just one, then told the whole family he was helping me get back on my feet. Suddenly, I was the needy daughter. Every Thanksgiving, he'd make comments about self-reliance within earshot. That's when I realized he uses generosity as control and silence as punishment. The class he paid for was Introduction to Financial Planning. Ironically, it cost $600. For months afterward, he brought it up in conversations. Well, I helped Callan with school, he'd say to relatives. But you can only do so much if someone doesn't help themselves. It painted a picture. The struggling older daughter who needed rescuing. The generous father doing his best. Meanwhile, Felicity's entire 4 years at Yale, plus living expenses, study abroad, and a new laptop every year were never mentioned as help. Those were investments. I was charity, and I was learning the difference. I wasn't supposed to see the draft of his will. But when Jamie fell asleep in Dad's office during a holiday visit, I stayed behind to grab his hoodie and saw it open on the screen. Felicity, sole beneficiary. Real estate, accounts, trust, all of it. Jamie and I weren't even listed as backups. I screenshotted it, then deleted the history. I didn't cry. I pivoted. The will was dated 6 months earlier. Everything went to Felicity upon his death. The lake house in the Ozarks, the investment portfolio, the retirement accounts, even the life insurance policy worth $800,000. There was a single line mentioning Jamie and me. Previous dependents from first marriage have been provided for adequately during lifetime. Adequately. The word burned. I sent the screenshot to my secure email, then cleared my phone's cache. I closed his laptop exactly how I'd found it. Then I walked back into the living room and smiled at everyone like nothing had changed. But everything had. Every spare dollar I had, I invested. Stocks, real estate, a quiet portfolio under a different business name. No flashy purchases, just quiet leverage. I studied at night, got certified, got hired at a data consulting firm, built a reputation for solving problems under pressure. I didn't need their approval. I was building an exit plan. My first investment was a foreclosed duplex in Springfield. I bought it for $43,000 using a loan from a credit union. Fixed it up over 6 months using YouTube tutorials and weekend labor. Rented both units for $1,200 each. That became my template. Within 3 years, I owned 4 rental properties. My portfolio generated $3,800 monthly in passive income. I kept my coffee shop job, so no one would ask questions. Let everyone think I was still struggling. Meanwhile, I was building wealth they couldn't see. And Jamie was watching everything I did, learning quietly beside me. When I declined Felicity's graduation invite, Dad called to guilt trip me. You're part of this family whether you like it or not, he said. I smiled, because he still thought this was about inclusion. It wasn't. It was about truth. And I was done playing their daughter just to make them feel good about leaving us behind. I have to work that weekend, I told him, voice even. You can take a day off, Callan. This is important. It's important to you, I corrected. I have bills to pay. Unlike some people, I don't have a trust fund to fall back on. Silence on the other end. You're being petty, he finally said. I'm being honest. I hung up before he could respond. Felicity graduated summa cum laude. The photos showed Dad beaming, Catherine dabbing her eyes, all of them dressed like they were attending a royal wedding. I spent that Saturday replacing a water heater in one of my rental units, and I didn't feel like I'd missed anything. I walked into Dad's house on Christmas Eve, only because Jamie begged me. He still hoped for something resembling family. I only came for him. Felicity opened the door. She looked me up and down, then handed me a coat rack hook like I was the help. "Try not to leave your bag on the couch this time," she said with a smile too clean to trust. My jaw tightened. That was the house Mom decorated every year until she was replaced. My baby footprints were still in the cement on the back patio. But somehow now I was the outsider. Dad didn't say a word. He saw it. He always saw it. He just let it happen. I stayed for 2 hours, smiled through dinner, complimented Catherine's dry turkey, listened to Felicity talk about her new job offer at an environmental nonprofit in Seattle. When she mentioned her starting salary, $72,000 with benefits, I did the math in my head. That was more than I'd made in 2 years of combined work. Jamie caught my eye across the table. He knew. We left together at 8, citing early morning plans. Dad didn't try to stop us. Jamie applied for a local college scholarship. One Dad's law firm sponsored. We were cautiously hopeful until he was denied. I congratulated the winner, then casually pulled public records and found something interesting. The scholarship had no formal application process that year. The money was redirected. Quietly, I asked Dad why. He said, "We prioritized a more deserving candidate. Someone with long-term promise." Translation, not Jamie. I didn't argue. I just added another piece to the file. The scholarship was called the Rhodes Future Leaders Award. $15,000 annually for 4 years. It was supposed to go to children of employees or community members. That year, it went to the son of a senior partner. No application, no interview, no competition, just a closed-door decision. I saved the board meeting minutes where the decision was recorded, saved the tax documents showing how the funds were allocated, saved the email where Dad explained it was for strategic relationship building. Jamie took it quietly. He always did. But I was keeping score, and the numbers were damning. Dad forgot I still had access to his company's old cloud storage, buried under my name from when I helped with taxes during college. One night, I downloaded every document he thought he'd hidden. Expense reports, receipts, corporate reimbursements, a few minor violations. Nothing criminal, but plenty unethical. Things that would look very bad to shareholders. Things I could sit on, quietly, until the time was right. I found travel expenses charged twice, personal dinners labeled as client meetings, Felicity's summer internship listed as contract consulting work, paid through firm accounts. There were emails too, conversations with Catherine about moving money between accounts, discussions about tax strategies that skirted legal boundaries. I organized everything into folders, cross-referenced dates with bank statements, built a timeline showing patterns of behavior. Then I encrypted it all and stored copies in 3 separate locations. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I was ready for the moment when I would be. I agreed to meet him and Catherine at a downtown restaurant. He said he wanted to rebuild. Halfway through dinner, she said, "We've always felt like you kept yourself distant." I smiled. Well, abandonment can do that. They laughed nervously, like I was joking. She leaned in. "Felicity sees you as a threat. You're very intense." I wiped my mouth. She should. Then I left. I didn't need closure. I needed them to remember what I looked like when I stopped pretending. The restaurant was expensive. White tablecloths, wine lists thicker than a phone book. Dad's way of showing he cared, spending money instead of offering actual emotional labor. Catherine wore pearls and spoke in that soft voice people use when they're trying to seem reasonable. "We want you to feel included," she'd said earlier. But inclusion isn't the same as equity. And I was done confusing the two. I paid for my own meal before I left. That mattered to me. 3 years ago, Felicity cried on video chat because she was about to fail college statistics. I built her study schedule, did flashcards with her, reviewed her homework, helped her pass. Dad never found out. He just told everyone how naturally gifted she was. Last week, she got hired at an environmental startup. She posted the offer letter on social media, tagged him, thanked him, No mention of me. But I kept the texts and screenshots because soon she'd need me again. And I'd give her what she gave me. Nothing. I remembered those nights clearly. Felicity panicking about failing, her voice high and desperate over the phone. I'd walked her through probability distributions, regression analysis, hypothesis testing. She'd gotten a B+ in the class. Dad had taken her to dinner to celebrate. Posted about her academic excellence. I'd been studying for my own finals in a coffee shop because our apartment was too cold to concentrate. Nobody celebrated me. I didn't forget that. And I wouldn't let her forget it either when the time came. My car died in the middle of a snowstorm. I called Dad. He let it go to voicemail. Then called Jamie 2 hours later to say, "Tell your sister to figure it out." A week later, Felicity posted a photo of her new Prius. Caption, "Thanks, Dad. You always come through." I didn't cry. I took the bus to work and filed my business paperwork that night because I wouldn't ask him for help again. I'd make sure he regretted not offering. The car had been a 2004 sedan with 200,000 miles. The transmission finally gave out on Highway 50, and I'd coasted to the shoulder in wide-out conditions. I'd sat there for 20 minutes, shivering, before calling Dad. He never called back. A tow truck driver eventually stopped. Charged me $140 I didn't have. I put it on a credit card that was already maxed. Felicity's Prius was pearl white. Hybrid. Fully loaded. She needed a car for her new job, she said. Dad had driven it across 3 states to deliver it personally. I rode the bus for 4 months before saving enough to buy another used car. But I never forgot. At Felicity's engagement party, Dad gave a toast. She's the first in our family to graduate college with honors. Everyone clapped. I watched Jamie lower his fork and look at me. I graduated summa cum laude 2 years ago. No one came. Later, I asked Dad why he said it. He blinked. Don't take everything so personally. But I do. Because every lie is another brick in the wall I'm building between us. The engagement party was at a country club. Ice sculptures, champagne fountain, string quartet. Felicity's fiancé was a software engineer named Preston. Nice enough but completely unaware of the family dynamics. Dad's toast lasted for minutes. He talked about Felicity's accomplishments, her character, her bright future. He mentioned Yale 3 times. He never mentioned me or Jamie once. Not as her siblings. Not as family. Not at all. We'd been erased from the narrative. I left early, citing work. Jamie drove us home in silence. He really doesn't see us, does he? Jamie finally said. No, I answered. But soon he won't have a choice. The hospital called. They said one of Jamie's diabetes treatments was denied. I checked the paperwork. Dad had removed Jamie from his insurance 2 months earlier, quietly. No notice. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He just said he's 19. He should learn responsibility. I walked out. And this time I took Jamie with me. That night, I added the final folder to the file I'd been building for 4 years. It was time. Jamie's treatment was a continuous glucose monitor. It cost $400 monthly out of pocket without insurance. Dad's insurance would have covered 80%. But he dropped Jamie the day he turned 19, claiming he was no longer a dependent. Never mind that Jamie was a full-time student. Never mind that the law allowed coverage until 26. Dad just decided Jamie wasn't his problem anymore. I added Jamie to my insurance through my employer. It cost me an extra $200 monthly. I didn't tell Dad. I just documented the insurance cancellation, the hospital bills, the dates. And I finalized my plan. What Dad didn't know was I'd worked quietly with my late grandfather's attorney last year to restructure my maternal inheritance, which included a dormant investment fund Grandpa left in my name. With the right documents, I appointed myself executor over a significant trust that Dad had long assumed was dead money. Felicity was counting on it. She'd mentioned it in a job interview. Too bad. She wouldn't be getting a dime. And now I had legal leverage, more than either of them realized. Grandpa had died when I was 17. He'd left me $75,000 in a trust that matured when I turned 25. Dad had dismissed it as nothing. Told people it was barely enough to matter. But I'd been patient. I'd let that money sit, invested it carefully. never touched the principal. By the time I took control, it had grown to 138,000. I moved it into accounts Dad couldn't track. Felicity had assumed, incorrectly, that Grandpa's money would eventually flow to her through Dad's estate. She told her new employer she had family wealth backing her. She was wrong, and she'd find out soon enough. Felicity sent my wedding invite last minute, seated me at the overflow table behind the speakers, told me she hoped I wouldn't bring anything dramatic. I didn't bring a plus one. I brought Jamie, in a tailored suit, confident, healthy, standing tall, and when her new father-in-law asked, "So what do you do, son?" Jamie looked him in the eye and said, "I run financial analytics for the woman who put herself through school with no help." That was my speech. He delivered it better than I ever could. The wedding was in June, at a vineyard 2 hours outside Kansas City. 300 guests, fairy lights, a 12-piece band. Jamie and I sat at table 19, near the kitchen entrance. But we didn't look like we belonged there. Jamie wore a charcoal suit I'd bought him for graduation. He'd lost weight, gotten healthy, grown into himself. People asked him questions. He answered confidently. He talked about his analytics work, his plans for graduate school, the rental properties we managed together. He never mentioned Dad. And slowly, people started realizing we weren't the charity cases they'd been told about. We were successful, and we'd done it alone. The night after the wedding, I sent one anonymous envelope to the board of my father's firm. Inside were reimbursement fraud documents, travel expenses charged twice, and Felicity's internship listed as research consulting, paid under the table. I never signed it, but I heard the fallout the next week. Dad was asked to step back from senior management, and Felicity got pulled from the nonprofit's board, pending investigation. Funny how truth spreads when it's documented well enough. The envelope was plain manila, no return address, postmarked from 3 towns over. Inside was a USB drive with folders labeled and dated, every document cross-referenced, every expense highlighted. I'd included a 1-page summary. No accusations, just questions. Please review the attached financial discrepancies and advise whether these align with firm policy. Professional. Devastating. The managing partners opened an internal investigation within 48 hours. Dad was placed on administrative leave within a week. Felicity's nonprofit position, which Dad had secured for her through a board connection, was quietly terminated. I didn't claim credit. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Felicity called Dad. Panicked. "I need help. They're saying I misrepresented my experience. This could ruin my job." Dad said, "We'll spin it. She has no proof." I was on the line. Jamie patched me in. I didn't say a word. Just recorded the call. You want a twist? They forgot Jamie works in compliance auditing. Every second of that call was enough to disqualify Felicity from ever holding a public trust position again. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Just press send. Jamie had interned with a financial compliance firm during college. He knew exactly how these investigations worked. He'd set up the 3-way call using software that kept us invisible. We listened to Dad coach Felicity on how to lie, how to claim the internship was legitimate, how to say I was a disgruntled former employee making false accusations. Every word was recorded. Every denial was documented. When the call ended, Jamie looked at me. "Do we send it?" I thought about every missed birthday, every broken promise, every dollar sent to Felicity while we struggled. "Send it," I said. And he did. He didn't know I'd be in the room. The firm held an emergency stakeholder meeting. The atmosphere was tight, press suits, forced smiles, lawyers in corners. Dad arrived late, confident like he always was, his voice calm like this would blow over. Until the managing partner gestured toward me. Callan Rhodes, our external forensic analyst. Dad froze. The color drained from his face. I stood calm. I had the file on the projector. The trail of misappropriated funds, quiet nepotism, false expense reports. Each line tied to Felicity or himself. Not with rage. Not with vengeance. Just facts. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. But the truth was, I'd stopped protecting him. There's a difference. By the end of that meeting, they voted him out of his own seat. He didn't say a word. I'd been hired 3 weeks earlier as an independent consultant. The firm needed someone with no internal connections to review the financial irregularities. I'd submitted my credentials under my business name, Rhodes Financial Consulting. They never made the connection until I walked into that boardroom. I presented for 40 minutes, showed patterns of expense manipulation spanning 6 years, showed how Felicity's salary had been hidden in contractor budgets, showed falsified client billing. The partners asked questions. I answered each one with documentation. Dad sat frozen the entire time. When the vote came, it was unanimous. He was out. Felicity called me 2 days later, her voice shaky but smug, like she didn't quite believe she could lose. I get it. You're mad. But you made your point, she said. I was in my new apartment, the one overlooking the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows and 0 ghosts. You think this was about getting even? I asked. Silence. I let her sit in it. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. For every year you let him divide us, every lie you repeated, every dollar you took thinking you were worth more than us. She started crying, or pretending to. I didn't stay on the call. I hung up, because now she had to live in the story she helped write. She'd called from a coffee shop. I could hear the background noise, people ordering drinks, music playing. Her life was falling apart, and she was in public pretending everything was fine, just like I'd done for years. I didn't know, she'd said before I hung up. I didn't know he was treating you differently. But that was a lie. She'd known. She'd just chosen not to care. And now the consequences were hers to carry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. 6 months later, I mailed a letter to my father. It came back unopened. Not because he ignored it, but because I'd had his mail forwarding revoked after he lost his firm address. I sat on my balcony, holding that letter. Inside was a photo of Jamie graduating early with honors, a copy of the trust paperwork with Jamie listed as successor, and a single note that read, I was never asking for $20. I was asking to matter. I didn't need to see his reaction. Because the real revenge is that I thrived without his name, his help, or his permission. I built something better than a grudge. I built a life. And he'll never get a seat at my table again. Jamie enrolled in graduate school for data science. Full scholarship. He moved into one of my rental properties, paying reduced rent while he studied. My business grew. I consulted for 3 major firms now, analyzing financial systems and rooting out fraud. Ironic, maybe, but honest work. Dad tried calling twice. I never answered. Felicity sent a letter apologizing. I read it once, then filed it away. Not out of bitterness. Just because I was done carrying their guilt for them. I'd asked for $20 when Jamie was dying. They'd given me nothing, so I'd built everything myself. And now, they'd never take that away from me. That was the real ending. Not revenge. Just peace.